By now, you've probably heard the big news emerging from the preliminary report from the crash of Air India Flight 171. The report identified that the two engine fuel control switches had been moved to the cut-off position, 3 seconds after the aircraft transitioned from the ground to the air. This subsequently resulted in the engines of the Boeing 787-8 being starved of fuel. Since these findings have emerged, some countries have instructed their airlines to inspect 787 fuel switches, while we've also learned that US investigators had been frustrated in their dealings with Indian authorities. We take a look at all of this in today's video. And so, regarding what was first thought to be some sort of dual-engine failure, has been understood to be fuel being cut off. Indeed, the cockpit voice recorder picked up one pilot questioning why the other switched it to cut-off, with that individual responding that they hadn't touched it. These fuel control switches were subsequently switched back to run 10 seconds after initial takeoff. Located in the wreckage, they were indeed confirmed to be in the run position. Other mechanical faults have been ruled out thus far, with these preliminary findings bringing into question why the fuel control switches ended up in the cut-off position. Air India continues to fully cooperate with authorities following the investigation that led to all but one passenger on board perishing in what has been the first fatal crash of a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Both pilots, who were based at the Airlines hub in Mumbai, had adequate rest before the flight from Ahmedabad to London Gatwick, with both pilots being classed as fit to fly. There were a limited number of fuel samples taken from the aircraft following the accident, with fuel contamination being considered as a possible factor in the crash. However, the report indicates that there were no signs of fuel contamination. According to the Air Current, an analysis of the initial 15-page report from the AAIB, the Indian Ministry of Civil Aviation Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau, identifies further factual details where the ram air turbine had immediately deployed following the shutdown of the engines and began start logic just 2 seconds after the control switches had been reverted to the run position. The gas temperature of the engines had begun to rise, and just one engine was able to relight, engine 2. However, it was unable to stop its core speed deceleration to allow reintroduced fuel. Reaction to the report by some countries has been swift. Some airlines had already started inspecting the switches. Meanwhile, the US's Federal Aviation Administration and Boeing have reassured operators that the switches are safe. On July 14th, India's Directorate General of Civil Aviation, or DGCA, directed airlines to check fuel switches on Boeing aircraft, including the 787 Dreamliner and some 737s, which are operated by the likes of Air India, Indigo and SpiceJet. The airlines are required to complete the inspection by July 21st. They will also have to submit their inspection plan and report after completion to the DGCA. The scrutiny over the switches also follows a special airworthiness information bulletin published by the FAA in December 2018 regarding the potential disengagement of the fuel control switch locking feature on various Boeing jets, including some 737, 747 and 787 models. However, none of them have ever crashed because of this. South Korea, which is also home to several Boeing operators, will also order airlines to inspect the switches. As reported by Reuters, a spokesperson from the South Korean Transport Ministry said the inspections were in line with the FAA's 2018 notice. Meanwhile, UAE carrier Etihad has issued a directive to its pilots to exercise caution while operating the fuel switches. 2018 Special Airworthiness Information Bulletin was issued based on reports from 737 operators that the fuel control switches were installed with the locking feature disengaged, but this did not warrant a serious Airworthiness Directive, or AD. According to the preliminary report, Air India had not carried out the suggested inspections as the Special Airworthiness Information Bulletin was advisory and not mandatory. However, the throttle control module was replaced on the accident aircraft in 2019 and 2023, but this was not linked to the fuel control switches, and there was no defect reported on them since being installed. So, for those less experienced with aviation, why do fuel cutoff switches even exist? Well, as explained by The Independent, these switches are used to start or shut down engines on the ground. In the event of an engine failure during a flight, the pilots can manually shut down or restart engines using these switches. And for obvious reasons, the switches also play a key role in the event of an engine fire. The last big piece of news coming from this crash in recent times is that investigators from the United States National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, were said to have threatened to withdraw from the Air India Flight 171 crash investigation due to a perceived lack of transparency and progress. Indian authorities were accused of being slow in releasing key information about the crash, and accessing the information contained on the aircraft's black boxes took longer than expected. A Wall Street Journal report claims that US investigators almost lost patience with their Indian counterparts. While the preliminary report was released within ICAO's 30-day guidance, Indian authorities have generally remained reticent about the facts of the investigation, leading to frustration from both families and foreign crash investigation teams. The Indian body investigating the crash had planned to transport the plane's black boxes to a facility away from Delhi, despite recently opening a new lab in the city, before ultimately deciding to process the boxes in Delhi after all. As reported by The Hindu, the NTSB's assistance was vital in retrieving information from these recorders, which contained approximately 49 hours of flight data from 6 flights. According to the Wall Street Journal report, at one point the NTSB threatened to withdraw American resources from the investigation. In the end, the American investigators remained in the country to assist. They have since returned home. And so, to wrap things up, it's clear that the preliminary investigation report has given us some answers, but raises many more questions at the same time. The obvious one being, how and why were those fuel switches in the cut-off position? Was this human error? Was this a technical fault? These questions, among others, will hopefully be answered in the coming months as investigators work towards putting out a final report, which often takes about a year. Because of the low probability that these switches were accidentally put in the off position, speculation around pilot suicide has been rife. Pilot unions in India have criticised this and urged restraint until all the evidence has come to light. The Airline Pilots Association of India, or ALPA-I, said it, quote, categorically rejects this presumption, adding that a fair and fact-centred inquiry is needed. And so, what are your thoughts and reactions to the findings put out in this preliminary report? And what do you think of how this has all been handled? Let us know by leaving a comment. In addition to our daily YouTube videos, Simple Flying publishes over 150 articles every week. If you're looking for the latest aviation news and insights, visit simpleflying.com.